I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel. Did you hear how a Palestinian TV program used a Mickey Mouse-inspired figure to instill anti-American and anti-Israel hatred and promote a message of Islamic dominion among children? Palestinian Media Watch and Memory were the first to expose the horrific translation of this show. On our program today, you'll learn more about Palestinian Media Watch and meet its founder, Itamar Marcus. Hello, and welcome to this edition of Focus on Israel. I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, founder of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating and sharing the message of Christian biblical responsibility to the people and land of Israel in the face of a global genocidal anti-Semitism. Proclaiming Justice to the Nations was birthed to stop the silence, to wake up Christians and people of conscience to the realities of a world bent on destroying Israel and the Jewish people. Since 2005, PJTN has a proven track record of fighting for the rights of Israel and the Jewish people, a record of standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds against a world of Jew and Israel hatred, a record of not compromising on the very plan of God. PJTN's strategy involves a campaign of biblical truth. The more Christians who see our materials and our media content, the more that will stand with the Jewish people and Israel. Media is a prime weapon of our strategy. This media battle is also being waged by Palestinian Media Watch, a watchdog group founded in 1996 by Itamar Marcus. Palestinian Media Watch documents cases of incitement in Palestinian media. It describes itself as an Israeli research institute that studies Palestinian society from a broad range of perspectives by monitoring and analyzing the Palestinian Authority through its media and school books. In 2003, after a period when Palestinian television was airing music videos promoting martyrdom and encouraging violence against U.S. troops in Iraq, Itamar Marcus testified in front of a U.S. Senate committee hearing to discuss the phenomenon. In 2007, Palestinian Media Watch presented the UK Parliament Select Committee on the European Union with evidence pertaining to Palestinian school books it said reject Israel's right to exist, glorify terrorism, and indoctrinate youngsters with hatred for Israel. A report Palestinian Media Watch presented to the United States House Committee on Foreign Affairs in 2008 indicated that the Palestinian Authority was engaging with enemies of the United States on a shared platform of hatred toward the U.S. The report argued that under such circumstances, the creation of an independent Palestinian state would contribute to undermining U.S. efforts toward world peace. In 2011, Palestinian Media Watch presented U.S. congressmen with a report indicating that more than $5 million of U.S. funding for the Palestinian Authority was being used to pay salaries to Palestinian prisoners jailed in Israel on terrorism charges. In 2007, widespread criticism was generated around a children's TV program aired from Hamas-run studios in the Gaza Strip. The program used a Mickey Mouse figure to promote anti-American and anti-Israel hatred to children. In 2008, Palestinian Media Watch generated outrage again when it circulated another translation of a Palestinian show in which a Bugs Bunny-like figure proclaimed, "I will eat the Jews." A Palestinian Media Watch report from 2012 stated that a puppet show performed in front of Palestinian children and sponsored by a United Nations-funded organization called on children to take up arms in lieu of cigarettes. A separate report from the same year stated that 2 television hosts from the Palestinian Youth Association for Leadership and Rights Activation organization that receives funding from the European Commission Humanitarian Aid Office described suicide bombers as the greatest role models for us during a weekly TV program. Australia's former ambassador to Israel, Ian Wilcock, in an opinion piece for The Australian, said of Palestinian Media Watch that it does an outstanding job of bringing attention to what the Palestinian Authority and related organizations are saying in Arabic, as opposed to the usually more temperate comments made in English for the world outside the Middle East. As examples, Wilcock stated that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was prominent in the ideology of the Palestinian Authority, that a Palestinian Authority youth magazine had featured a young woman dreaming of explaining to Adolf Hitler why she killed Jews, and that a PA newspaper had referred to Passover as the holiday of the apes. We now want to bring you just a few samples of the insidious videos and films that have been exposed by Palestinian Media Watch.
الدار ضربونا وجوا الغرب يطحونا ما بنستغرب هالإشي لأن الغدر بطبعهم من زمن سيدنا موسى عليه السلام لحد اليوم، وإن شاء الله كل ظالم بيرجع كذا في نحل، وقولوا معي آمين.
ציונים, חכו בגועה, אתגרה בכל מקום, חכו לבגועה, התאבדות בכל אוטובוס, בבית קפה, בכל רחוב, חכו לזהם ולנקמה לעזה, חכו ללהבות של הגדה, בבטוחתכם. ציונים, האם אתם עדיין זוכרים את הרקטות שהרעידו את תל אביב ואת הכנסת? רצינו רק להודיע לכם שיש לנו אלפים מהן.
وإياكم حجر الأساس لقيادة العالم بقيادة إسلامية.
ونذكركم أننا نحن العظماء انطلقنا في هذا البرنامج لنقود هذا العالم، وستكون النوى بإذن الله تعالى من هنا من فلسطين.
فلسطين يا سراء من أين بالضبط؟ من غزة؟ أم من القدس؟ أم من رام الله؟ أم من كل فلسطين؟
نعم من كل فلسطين. حدثني الكثير أنه كان لنا مجد وكانت لنا حضارة وكان للمسلمين العزة والكرامة.
نحن رواد الغد سنعيد لهذه الأمة مجدها وسنحرر الأقصى إن شاء الله وسنحرر العراق إن شاء الله وسنحرر بلاد المسلمين التي تجتاحها هذه الأثناء القتلة.
دواء
ما تسمع يا صديقي، في عندكم يهود؟ صديقي يا قيس.
هسه لا.
طيب انا سمعت هم بيجوا عليكم كل يوم.
بس هسه لا.
طيب اسمع يا صديقي، اعمل ايدك هيك.
مخيم.
لما يجوا عندكم اضربهم بوكس. خلي وجهه بنضاره.
ان شاء الله عشان نحرر فلسطين.
ان شاء الله. صديقي. طيب على العموم يا روان، انا بقول له يمسك حجر ولما يجي اليهود عنده يمسكوه وبوم.
طبعا الجيران اليهوديين عادي
يطبش عليهم
لو كانوا يهود، يعني جيرانه او صهاينه عادي
طيب ليش حابة تصيري شرطية؟ ليش؟ زي مين؟
زي عمو
مين عمو؟
أحمد.
هو شرطي؟ شو بيسوي طب الشرطي؟
بحبس الحرامي واللي بيعمل مشاكل
وبطخ اليهود صح؟ انت بدك تصيري زيه؟ ان شاء الله لما تكبري.
لما طخ اليهود
كلهم؟ كلهم؟ طيب.
وعما قريب إن شاء الله ستفتح روما كما فتحت القسطنطينية التي تنساح في أوروبا كلها، ثم تلتفت إلى الأمريكتين بل إلى أوروبا الشرقية لهذه المهمة، مهمة إنقاذ البشرية من نار هم على شفا حفرة منها.
أملنا بربنا الله يفك أسرهم، وهذول أبطال ما شاء الله بنرفع راسنا فيهم.
الحمد لله محبوس على شرف، مش محبوس على شيء ثاني.
الشباب بيطبش علينا حجار يا حاج.
الناس
الشباب بيلحقونا بالسكاكين يا حاج.
الناس
مهند الحلب بيطعنا يا حاج.
الناس
فادي علون بيطعن فينا يا حاج.
الناس
فوفو ايش بتقولي لشباب الضفة؟
اطعم 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 اطعم.
You just learned a portion of the truth about the world's most volatile region, the world's most demonized country, and the 2,000-year hatred of a people that have survived despite the odds. From studying history, it's very clear that what starts with the Jews never ends only with the Jews. We must strongly stand against any anti-Semitic trends, for if not stopped, they'll cause harm to all of us, and we'll witness the downfall of our Judeo-Christian Western culture. Today, many people say there's no longer a need for a Jewish state, that Jews around the world no longer need a place of refuge. But anyone who has heard recent statistics about the worldwide rise in anti-Semitism would never make such a claim. The reality is that neo-Nazi groups and Nazi sympathizers are increasing around the world. Surveys show that over 1 billion people in the world harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Close to 50% believe that Jews have too much power in the business world, and 2/3 of the world's population has never heard of the Holocaust or believe the historic accounts of it are inaccurate. Don't let yourself be manipulated by evil people with a wicked agenda. When the self-serving villains are in control, good people from all religions suffer. Muslims, Christians, and all people of conscience should stand proudly and show respect for a country that gives so much to the world in so many ways. Do your part, do your research, and do what you can to make a difference. Because what happens in Israel does affect us all. This is not just a Jewish or just an Israeli problem. This is a problem for all humanity, for each and every one of us who believe in freedom and human rights. Learn more about what you can do at pjtn.org. This month marks the 70th anniversary of the historic Declaration of the State of Israel. God's sovereign hand can be seen all over this land. Included in the celebrations is the opening of the American Embassy right here in Jerusalem. In honor of this celebration, PJTN is offering a special 70th anniversary package, which includes a captivating new book and an award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. Itamar Marcus is an Israeli political activist, researcher, and the founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch. His work on textbooks led Benjamin Netanyahu to appoint Marcus to represent Israel in the negotiations with the Palestinians on incitement in the Trilateral Anti-Incitement Committee. As director of research for the Center for Monitoring the Impact of Peace from 1998 to 2000, Marcus wrote reports on Palestinian Authority, Syrian, and Jordanian school books. Marcus testified before the Education Subcommittee of the U.S. Senate Committee on Allocations, documenting the Palestinian Authority's indoctrination of children to seek death as martyrs. He is also presented before members of Congress and to members of Parliament in numerous countries, including the European Union, Britain, France, Canada, and Australia, and has lectured in universities and conferences worldwide. Marcus is a former vice president of the Central Fund of Israel. Originally from New York, he now lives in the Israeli settlement of Efrat, Judea. He gave us insight about the vital work of Palestinian Media Watch.
They tell the world they're promoting peace. And when you listen to them, you see that the Palestinian Authority has named soccer tournaments after people like Abdul Basir Udeh, who blew himself up at the Passover Seder, killing 31 Israelis a number of years ago. This past year, they named a summer camp after Dalal Mughrabi. Dalal Mughrabi is a person who hijacked a bus. 37 civilians were killed. Why was the Palestinian Authority naming this summer camp after her? What we're seeing is that these people come, they kill civilians, these Palestinian terrorists, and then they are turned into legend and heroes in the Palestinian Authority. And this is a fantastic motivation for future terrorists. This is not a situation of a Palestinian Authority promoting peace. They are victims, the people are victims, but they're victims of their own hateful leadership that has brought violence and destruction and hatred upon them. And those are the people who they should be angry at, their own Palestinian leaders, not at Israel, who's probably done more for them than any country in history. There is ongoing demonization by the Palestinian leadership of Israel and of Jews. And I'll just give you some examples. In the last few years, we have heard the following libels. One, Israel is spreading AIDS and drugs amongst Palestinians. And that was said by the head of the Palestinian Drug Authority. Two, Israel is spreading prostitution and drugs, and that was said by an advisor to the Prime Minister Salam Fayyad. Israel is planning to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and is in very late stages of planning. The Mufti of the Palestinian Authority said that Israel is injecting acids into the ground under the Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to destroy it. Now, of course, that's a horrific libel when you're talking about a very religious population accusing Israel, but this is ongoing. These libels are ongoing. Israel is stealing body parts of Palestinians, and this was in the official newspaper. They even went so far as to say Israel buries Palestinians only 70 centimeters under the ground, so that when the families leave, Israel rushes and takes out the bodies and takes out the body parts and then transplants them in sick Israelis. Of course, that's ridiculous, yet this is the kind of hatred that they're promoting amongst their people. I'll give you another example. Since Yasser Arafat died, the Palestinian Authority has been saying that Israel poisoned him. Now, this is the person who created the Palestinian people really out of nothing. He is their hero. And they've been saying that Israel poisoned him. And we get this at every level, at the political level, at the media level. And then children repeat this on TV. In fact, one child was interviewed, and this has been broadcast 3 years in a row on the anniversary of his death. A child said on television, "I think the Jews poisoned him." And then he said, "Well, actually, I don't know how he died, but I know it was the Jews." So here this child, this Palestinian child, has heard so much hatred about Jews, so many libels and lies, that he is concluding that if something bad happened, if Yasser Arafat died, he doesn't even know how he died, but he is convinced it must have been the Jews. In a 12th grade Palestinian school book, they teach the 1948 war ended when with the greatest catastrophe in history, when the Zionist gangs stole Palestine and created the state of Israel. In other words, the children are growing up. Israel has no right to exist. It's a theft. The maps print everything as if there is no Israel, as if it's a world without Israel. So the education jumps back and forth between presenting a world in which Israel doesn't exist and presenting a world in which Israel stole Palestine in 1948. The children are growing up feeling victimized from the moment they were born, and therefore hateful of the one who supposedly turned them into victims. So the hatred is right there from the first moment throughout the Palestinian education. This hatred is not just toward Israel, by the way, in the education. This is a Palestinian Authority that gets hundreds of millions of American dollars every year, and they were teaching their children that terrorists who are killing, or people who are killing American soldiers who are heroic resistance against occupation, why is it, they say that the dog doesn't bite the hand that feeds them. But you know what? In the Palestinian situation, they keep biting and America keeps giving. The United Nations is problematic in two ways with regard to Israel and the Palestinians. One, UNRWA. UNRWA's role is to perpetuate the problem, to not let the people get out of the refugee camps, and to force the people to suffer for political purposes. So you have people in Lebanese refugee camps, for example, who according to Lebanese law have not been allowed since 1948 to actually have a profession or a business outside of the camps. They can't buy a home, even if they wanted to better their lives. And the UN goes along with this. The second thing is what UN money goes to beyond the refugees. And here we have, for example, over the years, we've had UN money actually sponsoring summer camps named after Palestinian terrorists who've killed a large number of Israelis. The Palestinian summer camps are involved in a lot of what they call political education. Really, it's indoctrination. We saw children being taught how to slit someone's throat. Literally, you saw young children running up to a boy with a plastic knife and literally slitting their throats. This was on Palestinian television in official Palestinian summer camps. A few months ago, there was a soccer tournament named after Wafa Idris, the first woman suicide terrorist. All the Western countries that are funding the Palestinian Authority are funding the Minister of Prisoners, who honors and glorifies terrorists regularly. They're paying salaries through the general budget of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. Terrorists who've killed dozens of people are on salary of the Palestinian Authority, and that money is coming from the United States and the European countries. The Palestinian Authority presents a face to the world as if they are the protectors of Muslims and Christians in the land. However, that is a false image. They very much are protecting and promoting everything Islamic, but they are destroying everything Christian. And just one of the great examples of this is just looking at the Christian population of Bethlehem. The Christian population thrived when Bethlehem was under Israeli rule, and in fact was about 65–70% of the population was Christian. Since the Palestinian Authority has taken over, since 1993, less than 20 years, the Christian population of Bethlehem today is around 10%. This is because the Palestinian Authority has allowed them to be persecuted. There have been reports over the years of Christian girls being raped by Palestinian policemen, and the policemen being arrested just for a few days and then released. until there is a Palestinian Authority leadership that teaches its people peace, so that we know they really want peace with Israel. They teach them acceptance. They teach them that Israel has been a wonderful neighbor for many, many years. If they would teach them to see Israel as a state with right to exist, who should live in peace by them, then we can begin to negotiate about some kind of land exchanges or land or giving more land to the Palestinian Authority and the creation of a state.
Well, we've come to the end of another edition of Focus on Israel, and I want you to know we appreciate hearing from you. Please send your comments and questions to comments@pjtn.org, and I'll gladly read them on a future program. I hope I've made it clear that the time to stand up is now. Be a leader in your community and in your church. One person can make a difference. Get involved with and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Call your senators, congressmen, the White House. Let your elected leaders hear from you. Visit our website to learn more. Sign up to receive free newsletters, action alerts, daily blogs, and order our films to share with family and friends. I want to thank you for watching our program today. Please encourage your family and friends to tune in and become informed as well. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.
I will